The room was silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself is holding its breath. 18-year-old Maya Johnson stood in the center of the courtroom, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the edges of the wooden podium. Her dark curls framed her face, but it was her eyes, sharp, unwavering, and filled with a fire that defied her age, that caught everyone's attention. The charges against her were serious: assault on an officer, resisting arrest, and disorderly conduct. The prosecution had painted her as a troublemaker, a reckless teenager who had no respect for authority. But as the trial unfolded, it became clear that something was off. The officers' stories didn't quite add up, and the evidence seemed flimsy at best. Maya, however, remained calm, almost too calm for someone facing the possibility of years behind bars. And then, just as the judge was about to call for a recess, Maya did something no one expected. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small, gleaming badge, and placed it on the podium. The room erupted in gasps. It wasn't just any badge, it was a CIA badge. The prosecutor froze mid-sentence. The judge's eyes widened, and even the officers who had arrested her exchanged uneasy glances. How could an 18-year-old girl, a high school student from a small town, possibly have a CIA badge? Was it real? And if it was, what did it mean for the case? The tension in the room was palpable, and as Maya opened her mouth to speak, the screen faded to black, leaving viewers hanging on the edge of their seats. Maya's story began in a quiet, suburban neighborhood where she lived with her mother, a nurse, and her younger brother, a bright-eyed 10-year-old who idolized his big sister. Maya was known for her sharp mind and her love of puzzles. She could solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute and had a knack for finding patterns where others saw chaos. But her life took a dramatic turn one fateful evening when she was walking home from her part-time job at the local library. It was a route she had taken countless times, but this time, everything went wrong. A police cruiser pulled up beside her, and two officers stepped out, their faces stern. They accused her of matching the description of a suspect involved in a nearby robbery. Maya tried to explain that she had nothing to do with it, but the officers weren't listening. Within minutes, she was handcuffed and shoved into the back of the squad car, her protests falling on deaf ears. The arrest made headlines, and Maya's face was plastered across the news, labeled as a dangerous criminal. But Maya knew the truth, and she was determined to prove it, no matter what it took. As the trial began, the prosecution painted a damning picture of Maya. They claimed she had attacked the officers when they tried to question her, and they presented grainy surveillance footage that supposedly showed her fleeing the scene of the robbery. But Maya's defense attorney, a seasoned lawyer named Mr. Daniels, wasn't convinced. He noticed inconsistencies in the officers' testimonies and began to dig deeper. What he uncovered was shocking. The officers had a history of misconduct, and the surveillance footage had been tampered with. But even with this evidence, the case was far from over. The prosecution was relentless, and the judge seemed skeptical of Maya's claims. It wasn't until the final moments of the trial, when Maya revealed her CIA badge, that everything changed. The badge was real, and it raised more questions than answers. How had an 18-year-old girl become involved with the CIA? What had she been doing in the months leading up to her arrest? And most importantly, what secrets was she hiding? As the screen faded to black, viewers were left with a sense of unease and anticipation. Maya's story was far from over, and the revelation of her CIA badge was just the beginning. What would happen next? Would the truth finally come to light, or would Maya's secrets remain buried forever? The answers lay in the next part of the story, but one thing was certain. Maya Johnson was no ordinary teenager, and her fight for justice was far from over. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as Maya's CIA badge gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. The judge, a stern woman with decades of experience, leaned forward, her glasses slipping down her nose as she examined the badge. "Ms. Johnson," she said slowly, her voice cutting through the murmurs, "would you care to explain how you came into possession of this?" Maya took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind 1,000 times. But now that it was here, the words felt heavy on her tongue. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady despite the storm, of emotions inside her. This badge is mine. I earned it. But to understand how, you need to know what happened to me after I was arrested. Maya's journey to that courtroom had started months earlier, long before the arrest that turned her life upside down. It was a journey filled with secrets, danger, and a truth so shocking it would change everything. After her arrest, Maya had been released on bail, thanks to her mother's tireless efforts to scrape together the money. But the damage had already been done. Her face was all over the news, and the whispers followed her everywhere she went. "That's the girl who attacked the cops," people would say, their eyes darting away when she looked at them. Even at school, where she had once been a star student, she felt like an outcast. But Maya wasn't the type to sit back and let life happen to her. She was a fighter, and she was determined to clear her name. It was during this time that Maya first encountered Agent Harris, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a no-nonsense demeanor and eyes that seemed to see right through her. He had approached her one evening as she was walking home, his voice calm but firm. "Maya Johnson," he had said, "I think you and I need to talk." At first, Maya had been wary. She had no reason to trust anyone, especially not a stranger who seemed to know more about her than he should. But there was something about Agent Harris, a quiet authority, a sense of purpose, that made her listen. He told her that he worked for the CIA and that they had been watching her for some time. "You have a unique set of skills, Maya," he had said. "Skills that could be of great use to us." At first, Maya had laughed. The idea of an 18-year-old girl working for the CIA seemed absurd, like something out of a spy movie. But Agent Harris was serious. He explained that the CIA had been monitoring a series of suspicious activities in her town, activities that seemed to be connected to a larger, more dangerous operation. They needed someone who could blend in, someone who could go unnoticed, while gathering information. And Maya, with her sharp mind and unassuming appearance, was the perfect candidate. "This isn't just about clearing your name," Agent Harris had said. "This is about protecting your country. But the choice is yours." Maya had thought long and hard about Agent Harris's offer. The idea of working for the CIA was thrilling, but it was also terrifying. She knew it would mean putting herself in danger, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that. But she also knew that this might be her only chance to uncover the truth about her arrest and prove her innocence. So, after days of agonizing over the decision, she agreed. What followed was a whirlwind of training and preparation. Maya learned how to gather intelligence, how to blend into a crowd, and how to defend herself if things went wrong. It was grueling, but she threw herself into it, driven by a fierce determination to right the wrongs that had been done to her. The weeks turned into months. Maya began to uncover pieces of a puzzle that seemed too big to comprehend. She discovered that the officers who had arrested her were part of a corrupt network, one that was using their positions of power to cover up illegal activities. But the more she dug, the more she realized that this network went far beyond a few rogue cops. It reached into the highest levels of government, and it was connected to something much darker, a plot that could put countless lives at risk. Maya knew she had to act fast, but she also knew that she couldn't do it alone. She needed evidence, and she needed allies. But in a world where trust was a luxury, finding either was easier said than done. Back in the courtroom, Maya's revelation had thrown the trial into chaos. The prosecutor, a slick, silver-haired man named Mr. Grayson, was quick to dismiss the badge as a fake. "Your Honor," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "this is clearly a desperate attempt to distract from the serious charges at hand. I move that we disregard this theatrical display and proceed with the trial." But Mr. Daniels, Maya's attorney, wasn't about to let it go. "Your Honor," he countered, "if this badge is genuine, it raises serious questions about the nature of this case. I request a recess to verify its authenticity." The judge hesitated, her eyes flicking between Maya and the badge. Finally, she nodded. "We'll take a 30-minute recess," she said. "And Ms. Johnson, you'd better be prepared to explain yourself when we return." As the courtroom emptied, Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had bought herself some time, but she knew the hardest part was yet to come. She glanced at her mother, who was sitting in the front row, her face a mixture of pride and fear. Maya gave her a small, reassuring smile, but inside, she was anything but calm. The truth was, she didn't know how this would end. She had risked everything to bring the truth to light, but now that it was out in the open, she felt more vulnerable than ever. The people she was up against were powerful, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. As the minutes ticked by, Maya's mind raced. She thought about everything she had been through: the arrest, the training, the sleepless nights spent piecing together clues. She thought about Agent Harris and the promise she had made to him. And she thought about her brother, who had looked up to her his whole life. She couldn't let him down. She couldn't let any of them down. But as the bailiff called the court back into session, Maya knew that the next few moments would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone involved. The judge took her seat, her expression unreadable. "Ms. Johnson," she said, "the court has verified the authenticity of your badge. Now, I suggest you start talking." Maya took a deep breath, her eyes locking with the judge's. "Your Honor," she said, "what I'm about to tell you will change everything." And with that, she began to unravel the story that would shake the courtroom to its core. But even as she spoke, she knew that the real battle was just beginning. Maya's voice echoed through the courtroom as she began to unravel the story that had been hidden for so long. "Your Honor," she said, her tone firm but measured, "this isn't just about me. This is about a network of corruption that goes far beyond what anyone in this room could imagine." The judge leaned forward, her expression a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "Go on," she said, her voice sharp. Maya took a deep breath, her mind racing as she tried to figure out where to start. She knew she had to be careful. Every word she said could either help her case or make things worse. "It started with my arrest," she began. "The officers who arrested me weren't just doing their jobs. They were part of something bigger, something dangerous." As Maya spoke, the courtroom fell silent. Even the prosecutor, Mr. Grayson, seemed momentarily stunned into silence. Maya explained how, after her arrest, she had been approached by Agent Harris of the CIA. She described the training she had undergone, the missions she had been sent on, and the evidence she had gathered. She talked about the late nights spent decoding encrypted messages, the close calls with dangerous individuals, and the constant fear of being discovered. But she also spoke about the people she had met along the way, people who had risked everything to help her, people who had become her allies in the fight for justice. "This badge," she said, holding it up for everyone to see, "isn't just a symbol of my work with the CIA. It's a symbol of the truth. And the truth is, the people who arrested me are part of a conspiracy that goes all the way to the top." The judge's eyes narrowed as she listened, her fingers tapping lightly on the bench. "Ms. Johnson," she said, "these are serious allegations. Do you have any proof to back up your claims?" Maya nodded. "I do," she said. "But before I present it, I need to ask for protection, for myself, for my family, and for the people who have helped me. The individuals involved in this conspiracy are powerful, and they won't hesitate to silence anyone who gets in their way." The room erupted into murmurs again, the tension palpable. The judge raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "This court will take your request under advisement," she said. "But for now, continue." Maya's story took another turn as she began to describe the evidence she had gathered. She talked about a hidden ledger she had discovered, one that detailed payments made to high-ranking officials in exchange for their silence. She mentioned a series of encrypted emails that pointed to a larger plot, one that involved not just local law enforcement, but also politicians and business leaders. "This isn't just about corruption," she said. "It's about a threat to national security. And if we don't act now, innocent people will pay the price." As Maya spoke, the prosecutor's face grew darker. He stood abruptly, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. "Your Honor," he said, "this is nothing more than a desperate attempt to deflect from the charges at hand. Ms. Johnson has provided no concrete evidence to support her claims, and I move that we disregard this fantasy and proceed with the trial." But Mr. Daniels was quick to counter. "Your Honor," he said, "my client has risked her life to bring this information to light. To dismiss it without consideration would be a grave injustice. I request that the court allow her to present her evidence." The judge hesitated, her eyes flicking between Maya and the prosecutor. Finally, she nodded. "Very well," she said. "Miss Johnson, you may present your evidence. But be warned, if this is a fabrication, there will be serious consequences." Maya nodded, her heart pounding. She knew this was her only chance. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small USB drive. "This contains everything," she said. "The ledger, the emails, the names of everyone involved. But before I hand it over, I need your assurance that the people in this room will be protected." The tension in the courtroom was almost unbearable. The judge leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "Bailiff," she said, "take the USB drive and ensure it is securely stored. We will review its contents in due course." As the bailiff approached, Maya felt a surge of anxiety. She knew that once the evidence was out of her hands, there was no going back. But she also knew that this was the only way to expose the truth. She handed over the USB drive, her fingers trembling slightly. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said. But just as the bailiff turned to leave, the doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. A group of armed men in black suits stormed in, their faces grim. "Everyone, stay where you are," one of them shouted. The room erupted into chaos as people scrambled to their feet, their voices rising in panic. Maya's heart raced as she recognized one of the men. It was Agent Harris. But something was wrong. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a look of urgency. "Maya," he said, his voice low but firm, "we need to get you out of here. Now." Maya's mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Agent Harris shook his head. "No time to explain," he said. "Just trust me." He grabbed her arm and began to pull her toward the door. But before they could leave, the prosecutor stepped in front of them. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice shaking with anger. Agent Harris didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his badge and held it up. "CIA," he said. "This is a matter of national security. Stand aside." The prosecutor hesitated, his eyes darting between Agent Harris and Maya. Finally, he stepped back, his face pale. Agent Harris didn't waste any time. He ushered Maya out of the courtroom and into a waiting car, its engine already running. As they sped away, Maya turned to him, her mind buzzing with questions. "What's happening?" she asked. "Why did you come for me?" Agent Harris glanced at her, his expression grim. "Because," he said, "they know. And they're coming for you." Maya's heart sank as she realized what he meant. The people she had been investigating, the corrupt officials, the dangerous operatives, they had found out about her. And now, they would stop at nothing to silence her. As the car raced through the streets, Maya felt a wave of fear wash over her. She had thought she was prepared for this, but now, faced with the reality of the danger she was in, she wasn't so sure. She glanced out the window, her mind racing. What would happen next? Where would they go? And most importantly, who could she trust? The car turned a corner, and Maya caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window. She looked tired, scared, but also determined. She had come too far to give up now. Whatever was coming, she would face it head-on. But as the city blurred past, she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The fight for justice had just begun, and Maya knew that the stakes had never been higher.